joining us on this CSSM summer session. It's really great that you're with us and can be here for our interview with Jon and Cassie Biggen. If you don't know who Jon and Cassie are, well, you've missed out on a treat. They've been around in Bradford for many years now. They've been involved in church leadership here and ministry here, and they often have worked with some of the most challenging areas in Bradford. And Cassie's also written a wonderful book. And Jonathan you might know because he's a composer and worship leader and musician, actually, but they're both worship leaders. So I'm really excited about this interview and what they're going to be sharing.
Me too. I'm excited.
With us
We're both
today.
excited.
We're both excited.
Oh,
we're jointly excited, apparently. I've given a really kind of short synopsis there, but Jonathan and Cassie, could you tell us a little bit more about yourselves and how you came to be in Bradford, how you came to be involved in the church?
Go first? You were in Bradford first.
Go first.
Okay.
No.
Well, I came to Bradford because I'd met this handsome Yorkshire man who was into heavy metal, which was a very unusual thing because I met him on a Pentecostal youth camp in Brid. So I met him when I was 15. We went off to university, and then he came back to Bradford, and so can't take a Yorkshire man out of Yorkshire, can you? Got to join him. So I came up here in 1996 when we got married, and I've been here ever since, and I love it.
Yeah, and apart from 4 years when I was a student, I have not lived anywhere else.
Why would you want to? It's in Yorkshire.
Yeah, Bradford, born and bred.
Aye.
Okay, so just tell us a little bit about what you've done in Bradford for the last however many years. I won't put a number to that. I'll be kind.
Yeah, thank you. So we've nearly been married 25 years, so I'll put a number to it. So it's this year, it's a quarter of a century. So a quarter of a century in Bradford this August. We started off doing worship, being on the eldership of a local church, doing social action projects, planting an old age church.
And teaching.
Teaching, yeah. Yep. We had people live with us that were going through recovery. We've done different kinds of church plants. We've planted a church plant over the other side of the city in sort of Heaton, Manningham area, and we had a community house there, and we had a worship room in the basement. And we've moved around, but the same small patch, many houses, and just worshipped, lived, met people, shared life, shared food, shared houses, and learned from them in the city, really. So that's
Cool. So, I mean, you've sort of started to do a little bit of reference to some of the other places in the city that you've been.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But when I think of you, I think about sort of two things. Firstly, you're passionate about the urban poor and the marginalised, but also you've done a lot of sort of cross-cultural stuff because obviously Bradford has lots of different cultures as part of its makeup now. Yeah. And you made reference to Heaton, which is an area of Bradford that's sort of quite Muslim-dominated, but also some Eastern Europeans living in that area now as well. Yeah. So you've really sort of gone out and been to places that other people don't always go, without even leaving Bradford, because you don't need to, as we were just saying. So how have you seen the gospel being relevant, and how have you made the kingdom real to people who have got not even any church background at all? And you've been doing quite a lot of that. Tell us a bit about that and how it all worked out.
Yeah, how it all worked out. That's a big one.
Can I just say something?
Yeah.
So I think the interesting thing about us moving when we moved to the other side of the city, which is mostly Pakistani Muslim area, that came about through, I think, initially me working in a school in that part of the city. And it's interesting how sometimes just the everyday things that you're doing lead you then on to something new. And we wouldn't have ever thought about moving out of BD4, which, if you know Bradford, everybody talks in postcodes. So we would have never thought of leaving BD4 to go all the way to BD9, which is like 3 miles. But just out of circumstance, it kind of became a thing that happened. And it's interesting that I see God using the everyday to guide us a lot of the time. Anyway.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. And I think the interesting thing was that when we went there, God said, you'll find the house, and when you find it, just go, and you'll know what I'll tell you what to do there when you get there. So it was really strange to kind of rock up into this house that we were renting, big house, this huge, it was an old private school, quirky old place. And we just set the basement up to worship in it. We took quite a few people to live with us. We filled every corner of it, us and our kids. And I think there were 28 people that stayed with us over those 4 years for some amount of time, and many more that passed through the basement and the worship. And I think that was we've never really sort of gone with a plan, or it was just, okay, we'll start to worship, we'll see what happens. And I mean, just one story of what can happen. It was just one lad working at a gym, one of the local lads, Muslim lad, just walking past the house, and we bumped into him outside, started chatting to him about his little lad, and that just evolved into a conversation about faith and spirituality and hunger and searching, and then sharing Jesus with him and seeing him come to a deep relationship with Jesus and stay with us for a bit and marry and move on, and it was just that thing of being a passing place for people to encounter the love of Jesus. And I think the different contexts we've been in, the different levels of need, whether it's a largely white housing estate or whatever, if you go in as a lover and a listener first, then you begin to pick up what's going on in the area, and you begin to see how, if you believe that the heart of God is the restoration of everything, you can go in loving, you can go in listening and see what he's doing to restore it, and then people can get excited about that, and I think that if we go in with more of a plan than that, we start to put our agenda or our idea of how this might progress and things might work out, on top of that. I mean, what if God wants to restore something of Islam, the beauty of it, the hunger, the passion of people, and yeah, we wanted everyone to encounter Jesus, because my goodness, once you have, why wouldn't you? But it wasn't necessarily about moving them out of anything into anything else. It was just about seeing God restore them in their context, in their families, in their. So I think that was the beauty of it. There were lots of complicated things about it. There was, as we began to see people get baptized from different cultures and faiths, there was the influence of the wider church on that was hard and had different expectations and all the rest. And there was all of that to tackle, but to see people encounter Jesus and to see people begin to encounter hope, I mean, another story, a bit wacky, but I remember one mum coming, a single mum, she came to us, amazing prophetic woman, and she just was gathering the young people together on her estate, and they would smoke weed and they would do prophetic art together, and God was speaking to them about their estate and hope and their futures and their, that's not a small group that we would have ever contemplated setting up, really, but they had no problem just listening. The art was beautiful. Like, I don't know if any school would have expected to see those kids with a paintbrush and a canvas, let alone speaking, God over each other and hope and future over each other in the way that they were, So I think we've just always been amazed to see, like, if we don't try and control it, what can grow and what God can do,
Yeah, I mean, I think you've given us some real keys there. You brushed over one because you were like, "Oh, just moved into this area." Now, I remember visiting you in the house, and I was really supportive, wasn't I? Because I basically walked around and laughed and was like, "Oh, only you two would come here with no idea how it's going to work out, who you're going to put in the rooms, how it's going to work out financially," and you just went and did it because the Lord said to do it. So you went, you were incarnational. Yeah. I mean, I love your bit about loving and listening. Yeah. About not expecting that you're coming with the answer, which is what we so often do. Yeah. Anything else? Because I mean, I sort of think you also did quite a lot of serving, and you haven't talked that much about that. And I know you won't. Sometimes you won't always talk about that. You tell us a little bit more about some other people who stayed in the house and how because you served them and you loved on them in quite amazing ways.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's I mean, when we came to East Bowling in '96 and we came to the local church here, and there was a precedent set of, you know, you share your home and you see, and people come through, and it's not necessarily a forever thing. It's a transitional thing for most people, but in that time, be family and learn from each other and build resources. And I mean, the guys that lived with us back in the early days, you know, some of whom are still our close friends, they taught us so much, especially the guys in recovery, about like honesty and service and resentments when you're living together and how to tackle them, and not, you know, all of that kind of, I guess, what the New Testament talks about when it talks about loving one another, you know. So they'd already laid a foundation in us back then, hadn't they? Really of what this could look like. So then in any context that we moved into, you know, different cultures living together. Jonathan's got a really dry Yorkshire sense of humour. I mean, I've had to coach him in using emojis on WhatsApp. You know,
you and me both, Jonathan. I have no idea what they are.
It's the offence is quite, you know, can come back. But a laughing face after that might help give him a clue, John. But you know, different cultures, different, you know, what table conversation, food.
What you're saying is I was very misunderstood.
Yeah, that was just by the church. No, but yeah.
Hey, we've all been misunderstood by the church, Cassie. Tell us about it.
Yeah, so I think that, but I think it was those early years of living with people in recovery that taught us tons. And then being in just again in that bigger context in the house of just making mistakes and learning a lot, you know, and trying to be a place where we, however long people stayed with us, it was something that, I don't know, benefited them and benefited us, that blessed them, moved them on in their relationship with God and in their life in practical ways as well, you know, seeing people start degrees, seeing people, I mean, back in the early days, seeing people start reading, you know, because sometimes you don't really read till you start to read scripture and all of that kind of thing. So so I think just trying to be that context as people and as a family, sharing money, sharing resources, sharing all of those kind of things. I think,
Wonderful. I think it's interesting. One of the things you've again kind of said very quickly is that your basement in this house was a place of worship. It was you spent a lot of time in there worshiping, and people would come and join you. So I want to ask a question about worship now, because often people talk about, oh, you know, I go to a church and I worship there, and they talk about it as something that they do. So how have you two made that transition from being it's something that you do to actually being something that you live and something that you are? So how can we make that transition? How have you done that, and how can other people do that?
What do you say?
I'm thinking it through again.
I think really understanding the transformational power of worship. I mean, you know, whether you actually see it from a Christian perspective or not, you know, there's the whole thing about vibration and song and frequency that just, it changes us, the cells in our body, you know, it changes our perspective and our mood. And I think, you know, in a context where most people come with a lot of trauma, you know, you begin to see that, and then you think, well, that extends beyond us in a place that goes out on airwaves to the, you know, the streets where we're at. And, you know, that's when we began to wonder if, you know, if the song would invite people in, if the spirit on the song would invite people back to a place without a sign on it saying, come here and encounter God, you know. And that's what, and like I say, that's what we began to see. So I think once you realize the power and the potential of that to change you, to change our DNA, to make us love like he's love, you know, to make us like the one that we look at. I think then you begin to see it as everything, really, you know. I mean, that's all the Quakers did, wasn't it? They sat and they worshipped, and you look at our city and what was built on the back of that, because their worship then they went out and, I don't know, built Bull Exchange, and they built the canal, and do you know what I mean? It was that moved them and changed them into the people that God wanted them to be. So I think when you begin to see that, it can't be compartmentalized. This is about the way you love, the way you walk around the house, the way you do everything. So I think that's sort of been part of that for us.
but I think like when you say worship, a lot of people will think of certain things, and they'll usually these days they'll think of a stage, and they'll think of lights, and they'll think of great musicians and everything like that. And we have to think differently, I think. And I think being in the house where we were, in the basement where we were, and beyond that now, wherever we go now, it's not like that. And worship's something that's it is participative. I managed to say that on camera, amazing. And in that you're not watching something at the front, and churches these days, it can become that. We had that privilege of being in a basement, sat in a large circle where everybody could play an instrument if they wanted. Everybody could join in. There's no stage, there's no celebrity and all that kind of stuff, which sounds really negative, and I love a lot of that stuff. I love a lot of that music, and it inspires me and encourages me, and I probably wouldn't do without it. But give me a small room and people who are willing to experiment with art or with singing, preferably not dancing. That emoji or whatever. But just give people an opportunity to express their love for God, or their need for God, or their questions through worship. That's what gets me excited, and that's how I connect day to day when I'm sitting in my office with my guitar, just trying to come up with something new that will tell God how I feel that day, and hopefully that'll then lead into a song which encourages me, because I like my songs. And if I want to listen to worship songs, I listen to my songs because they speak about where I'm at and my connection with God. So, but hopefully they encourage other people as well. So
you've talked about being worshippers and how that's about a lifestyle, which is, we've seen you live out, but you're both also musicians. You're both quite gifted musicians. And we've had don't pull a face, Jonathan. You are. I know what you like. Because you're speaking to another Yorkshireman now, so I can spot it. But you come and lead worship for us at school at CSSM, and you've led in other settings, in some quite big settings actually. But I know you and I have talked a lot about the songs and where they come from and what we like, but we've also discussed the pull of consumer church and how worship can actually end up being about a performance, led by a group of people who are wanting to do it well, but there's a pressure to sort of do it in a certain way, make it sound a certain way, make it acceptable. You avoid that, or you try your best to avoid that. How can you do that? How can you be, and how can you, because you've talked about being a lead worshipper rather than a worship leader, but how do you make it genuine for everybody and not turn it into a performance? What things do you need to avoid?
Well, I avoid talking. That's a big thing. Just because people don't need to hear my voice, they don't need to be drawn to me and have me as their attention, their focus. So I avoid that. If I've got the freedom to, I will encourage other people to play, but they don't need to be on a stage, and I don't need to be on a stage. More often than not, I try to avoid being on the stage and just play at the side. But I'd encourage. So we've had people playing dole drums, which is
not doll drums.
Not dole drums.
Doll.
Dole, DHOL.
Yeah.
Primary school teacher. Yeah. Which is a very different style of playing and reflective of the city we're in, and creates a different vibe or feeling, and will be uncomfortable for people who are used to coming to white church all the time with a very clear idea of what rhythms would be like. But to me it was completely liberating, and having to let go is quite hard when you're leading, but allowing that sort of thing to happen was absolutely fantastic, and I miss that these days because it's not my experience at the moment. I'm trying to remember what the question was.
About worship.
How do you avoid performance turning into
performance? Oh, right. Well, as much as you say gifted, etc., etc. I'm a very simple musician that God takes and uses, which is brilliant. But you ask me to play something complicated and elaborate, I can't do it. So that keeps me very humble. I'm usually around people who are better than me. They may not have the same gifting I have, but they're better musicians, and that's all right. And I'm okay with that. And I strive to get better, and I do work at it. But I'll never be a great musician, but I'll be somebody God uses, and that's all I'm bothered about.
I always think that when the way that Jon leads worship is like, and because you spend a lot of time crafting a set of songs, and I feel like it's like he sets a really big feast on a table, and then it's like anybody can come and partake of that feast, but you just laying the feast out and saying, look how good he is, look how good this is, and then it's almost like just stepping back and rolling out that feast. And I think it's not always, it means it doesn't always kind of work in one respect, because it requires people coming up and participating. I mean, Stuart, you'll remember many years ago, my terrible sermon, or it was received terribly at the CU, at the uni, and my invitation to people to come, and the tumbleweed that kind of rolled across. Yep. No one came. You know, you can try, you can lay the feast out, but then there's times when people do, and they come and they eat, and then they express their joy in what they're eating, whatever that sounds like, you know, whatever that looks like. There are just those incredible moments, and once you've had those incredible moments, you never want to go back to actually we're responding to you know, the music or the performance. None of those are bad things, but once you've seen that and tasted that, you know, just that, oh, everyone's at the feast, everyone's eating, you know, people are passing food around, this is something truly communal, and he is here. Yeah. And
probably we don't always communicate that you eat, everybody comes and adds to that feast as well. So
it's the bring and share.
So you get it ready, but it's not all on me to make something happen as if I can. So but there's a lot of time goes into getting that ready, and I think people think, oh, spontaneous worship, blah blah blah, all that sort of thing, but actually it requires a lot of time and a lot of crafting, and that's what I love doing. That's the bit I love as much as when you do that, when you deliver, if you know what I mean. So that's what gets me excited. And
well, that's really great, and I think it kind of leads on to our next question, which is about shifting atmospheres, because I think you know, one of the kind of bigger pictures of worship is what atmospheres are we living in, and what atmospheres are in the place that we worship and how we impact that. And I loved when you were telling us about the house that you lived in at the other side of Bradford. You talked about one of your prayers was that the worship would go out and would impact people on the streets, that it isn't just this thing that Christians do together, and it doesn't have an impact outside of what we do. But, you know, living in a city like Bradford, which is very similar to many cities in the UK now, very multicultural, lots of different socioeconomic challenges, there are lots of different atmospheres in our city. We could name them negative atmospheres as well as positive ones as well, which often people forget about. How do you feel we can make a difference shifting those atmospheres through our intercession and through praying? And intercession can be a bit of a scary word for people, so it'd be really great if you just unpack that for us a little bit.
I think one of the biggest things that the time in Heaton and Tinnacorry that just really impacted me was about what the atmosphere that we carry and what we take into it. Because I guess growing up in the kind of different movements of the church and the things that God was bringing to the church's attention, there was such a kind of a fear and a defensiveness. It's kind of like intercession or warfare. You went in on the back foot always. And it's like, so you're always going in with this atmosphere of suspicion and fear, and, you know, what are we walking into, and are we prepared, and what's going to happen, and all of those kind of things, and just getting rid of all of that, you know, and just thinking, actually, is there is there really anything that is more powerful than the love of God? And if that's all that we carry when we walk into somewhere, how will that not be brighter than anything else in the room? And I think it took us, if you know, it's taken us a lot of years of stumbling and tripping and failing in that, and actually kicking up fights we didn't need to. We don't need to fight. I'm not here to fight. You know, we started off in that big house. We all got sick. You know, we all did.
I
Oh, you
didn't.
didn't.
No,
Sorry,
I didn't.
he didn't get sick.
I looked
We
after
all
you
got sick,
I looked
and
after you.
and there were some crazy things that happened, really crazy things that happened. But they didn't need. I don't know if they actually needed to happen. I don't know. We weren't there for a fight. We were there to love. We didn't need to respond to that. And I think so. I think being more aware of what we carry in it was a well, it's made it all a lot easier and more fun, you know, and taking away any the fear of that. I think we kind of picked up in the teaching of the church for a lot of years, you know, and I guess that's God's maturing us all, isn't he? And we mature by doing it wrong. So I think that's the biggest thing with the shifting of atmospheres is you can't shift what you carry. You know, in a city that's full of fear and suspicion and whatever else, if we go in like that, we've got no authority over it at all, you know. So we're just going to get a bit squished in the process. So you know, go in with love, and it you know, it will multiply and it will grow. And I think the other thing is that there are some incredible atmospheres in this city that we want to actually I want it to receive. So as much as we send a song out, you know, picking those songs up from the city, from its past and its history, from the current, the music that's in our streets, the dolls, the wedding marches, or whatever. I think one of them, well, probably the most powerful time of worship we ever had in the basement was when you'd written a song and the scale was different. So it was a kind of more Eastern scale and sound. And there was just this, I don't know, it was just like that kind of like, at that time I'd been down to this Bangladeshi community centre. I got to know some of the guys down there, and the hospitality, the feast that they laid on us, you know, just kind of picking up the richness that was around us in that place and allowing it to shape our worship and receiving from it and then giving it back to God. And there was that, you sang that song, didn't you? And the sound was so different to anything in worship. And we'd had the doll played it that night in worship. And at that, there was just this point in the evening, and one of the girls was filming it, the worship generally anyway, because everybody filmed everything to watch later. But you could see these orbs just dancing around the room. You know, they weren't dust marks on the camera. We checked with a friend who's a filmmaker, but they were dancing. It was just this. But regardless of that, you know, just to be there in that, and it was just like the kind of receiving from the city and giving it all back to God and letting it shape us and shape our sound, and just that growing in security and love, so that there was no wrong fight left in us, no judgment left in us in that way. It was just really beautiful. It's kind of that thing where you want to live there.
And I mean, I remember writing that song to try do something different, but it doesn't mean I have to do that all the time. No. I think that's the important thing, that let's not make a commodity of it now. That was just for then. And
it was
I love listening to it now, but it feels like it was for a time. And I think the other thing that I was going to say about when we moved over there, I don't think we actually did anything different to what we normally did when we gathered. We still worshipped the same way. So as different people came in, they might bring a different sound and things like that, but actually we didn't really change. We didn't go with, we're over here and we've got to be careful.
No,
we just did what we normally did, which is to allow time for something to happen as we turn our gaze and look at him and sing to him. So
wonderful. I mean, one of the things that's kind of coming through everything that you're saying is just how much you try and follow his lead, try and follow what he's saying, and you're not trying to package it up. You're not trying to make it some formula. You're not trying to say it's some, you know, formula that everybody else has to follow. But actually, you're trying to listen to him and do what he says in that place. But you are both prophetic. We know that because it comes through your worship, it comes through when you speak, Cassie, it comes through when we're in conversation with you personally, with both of you. So obviously this has been an interesting year, this last year. None of us have lived through a pandemic before. And there has been so much said prophetically. People have said all sorts of things, contradictory things. And we supposedly have now had Freedom Day in the UK, but we all know that the pandemic is not over, and we are still living with it and the consequences of it. So what do you both feel sort of prophetically is happening, and what God is saying in this season?
I'm going to write a song about it.
Yeah.
Um,
I think there's been, like you say, there's been so many words spoken. If you're on social media, there's so many things said. I think I've been sitting in Ephesians 4 a little bit, where it says, put off falsehood and speak the truth to one another in love, I think it is, because you're members of one body. And I think what's really stood out to me in that is the discernment. That we all need to ask for more discernment. I mean, it talks about judging angels in the Bible, but I think you could read that, judging messengers. So we are getting messages from every side, aren't we? From different voices in the church, from different voices in the media, different places. It can feel very overloaded a lot of the time, and I think that the discernment to discern between messages that we're getting, what of them are really expressing the heart of God, wherever they're coming from, and I think God wants to equip us more in that, the ability to listen and to discern and to put aside everything that really isn't relevant, wherever it's, and just focus on what he's saying. So putting off, and I think that for me is falsehood. There's so much that's spoken that's not rooted in any kind of truth, and put off falsehood and speaking the truth to one another, because we love each other, inside out, wherever whether we call ourselves inside the church or outside of it. We, as human beings created in the image of God, to express love, to encourage, to speak truth. We have to be able to discern what is true, and speak from that place, and remembering our one anotherness, that we are one. We are one in him. We are one, and again, that's everybody. So I think that prophetic, I think that's the biggest thing that I would want to see people do. We all have the potential to be grown-up children of God, who can discern between the messages that we hear, and who have something of truth to speak into our own lives and the lives of other people around us. And you're not going to get there without practicing that, without practicing listening, without being intentional about asking God to kind of wake up and raise up that discernment in you. And I think that's massive for us at the moment. We are one. We are one. We're in this together, truly, but speaking truth in that is really important. And I think listening without judgment is massive. So I mean, if I can say one thing that's really on my heart at the moment in that, is that I really feel like we need to be listeners as the church, as the people of God. Listen to what different groups in the culture are speaking of the heart of God to us. So I don't hear a lot of listening about what a lot of young people especially are saying about sexuality. I don't hear a lot of listening and saying, what is God speaking to us through this? What are they teaching us? What do they have to teach us about maybe where we haven't got it right or heard it right? Because I think he's moving in them and he's moving amongst them to actually perhaps challenge some of the paradigms we have, and to think again what it means to be, no longer male and female in Christ. What does it mean? And what might, instead of going in thinking we have got to say something, when we hear and listen and begin to grow in our discernment rather than, jump in. So I think he wants grown-up kids. And I think the pandemic has given us opportunity to push ourselves in being grown-up kids.
I mean, what I would say is it's been a really weird time, but for me it's been a very strange time personally, because I'm no longer in a church at the moment. And what that's really done is challenge me on what are the most important things, and how many things that I think are important, I don't have anymore, and I'm okay without those things. So what foundations are truly important, and what, yes, I miss certain things. Yes, there are things I don't miss. It's that kind of thing. But actually, as a person who is still trying to pursue God, but doesn't actually attend a church, a regular church, if you know what I mean. What are the important things now? And what I'm sure I'm not the only person in the UK who's feeling like that. And so actually the questions I have are probably the questions a lot of people have, and so they're the things that I'm thinking about and trying to figure out and talking to her about, and not to be told what the answers are, although that's usually what happens. Yeah, but you know what I mean, that those are the really important things, I think, because what's left when you take away certain things are the things that are left, are the important ones, or do you realize, oh, I was holding on to this, I was holding on to that actually they don't really matter. So yeah.
Well, let's just try and refine that a little bit more. I mean, we've all had conversations with each other about church and what it should be and what it is, and but you started yours on something else, which is the impact of the pandemic. So I'd love us to just think for a few minutes, what are the things that actually we've got an opportunity to leave now, to ditch, and what are the things that we've got to hold on to in this transition as we're starting to get, I mean, some of us, try to keep worshipping anyway, but what are the essential things, and what are those things? You sort of made reference to it, Jonathan, but can we be a bit more specific? What do you think are the things that, that's got to stay, but actually these things, we found out they weren't that important, actually?
Well, I mean, the biggest thing I've missed is community still. I still miss that. I still miss being with other people and sharing in that. What don't I miss? I don't miss lots of talks all the time, if I'm really honest. We're bombarded with information. I only need a little bit to think about. And so going to church every week and hearing another sermon, I don't miss that, because there's enough information at the moment. And, I think I know what I mean by that. I hope you get what I mean. I'm quite simple. If I could change my life on one thing in 6 months, that would be progress, wouldn't it? But we're bombarded with stuff all the time to change, to be this, to do that. And so I don't miss being talked at. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. I miss worshipping with people face to face, but I've also experimented worshipping online, and it's okay. And so I've learned something new in that, that we can gather people, and we don't have to be in the same room, but things still happen because we're still honoring God when we do that. I guess another big thing for me is, can we equip people to be independent of church, as in, so for me it's dead simple. Can I teach people to play guitar so that they can worship in their own homes? And actually, I can do that, and that gives life to people. They don't need somebody like me to be there for them to worship. So those are the kind of little things, I guess. There's bigger stuff like communion, and how important that is, and how we can do it in our homes, and need to do that, but we don't need to go to church to do that. And sometimes the message is that you do, and I don't agree. So there you go.
Come on, Cassie, keep stirring us.
Well, I remember in the question that you wrote, you said, what should we ditch? And it's like, I wonder if in the closing of the buildings, and there was an opportunity to ditch everything, really, and to sort of say, okay, so let's let it all go, and what comes back, because you kind of look at the history of different reformations in the church, and they were always there, well, we'll go this far, but that's not going, I just wonder if we kind of gave permission within ourselves and to the Spirit to say, well, if it all went, what would you want to resurrect, God? What would you want to bring back? What would it look like? And I think my sorrow has been in the kind of people that I'm involved with, the people that I love, pray with, watch, lead, is that often they've not been allowed to, you know. And I think the church weren't necessarily the heroes of this pandemic. There were a lot, but we weren't. And maybe that was a gift from God as well. We didn't have to be, you know. But there was an opportunity there that I don't know if we really took hold of. Yeah, if God's doing the dismantling, then we have to be careful that we don't say stop too soon. I guess that's that would be the biggest thing for me. So yeah, ditch everything, and then a lot of what we pick back up is, I think, is the heart stuff toward one another, and that involves the heart change from us, doesn't it? So that's like, yeah, how much judgment is still in me? How well do I love? How well do I? How much do I dare speak truth? How much do I, all of those kind of things. So I think they've been my questions and challenges to myself in this. Am I ready? I mean, we were at the start of the pandemic, I think, pretty tired and pretty jaded by some of the experiences we've had. Am I ready to one another again? You know, am I willing to and what can grow from that? So yeah. And I think as somebody who's been involved in church planting and all the rest, and seeing the beauty of community and the, I don't know, and how little we still know of how to do it well. There's so many questions that I still have, you know, about how to stay as community and love each other well when so many of us have got so much of trauma and baggage that actually destroys and community. How do we do that? How do we see healing? How do we, I mean, I know we have tools, I know we see people, but there's still so many people who come through those and are still bound. How do we love for the long haul? What does that look like? Yeah. So there's still a lot of questions like that for me still in it all, but yeah, I'd say ditch everything.
Wonderful.
Not guitar-led worship.
Nothing too contentious then, Cassie. Just stop all that.
Not guitar-led worship by white people.
Anything else can go. All else can go. No. Yeah.
No. But I mean, I think sometimes it takes that radical voice to say the thing that nobody else wants to say, to make people kind of go, actually, what is it? Because it's so easy, isn't it, to kind of keep on doing the things and thinking that we're doing it because it's somehow biblical, until we actually stop and realize it was never in the Bible in the first place. I mean, you know, nowhere does it say, you know, have a 10-piece worship band on a stage doing you know, and a 40-minute sermon, and you know, ministry done in such and such a way. I mean, it does, you know, those things aren't there. People gathering and people sharing and people worshipping absolutely was there, but you know, we sometimes have forgot to look at what that looks like in today's context,
and devoting themselves to the teaching. But we've made that devoting themselves to listening to a 40-minute sermon without any, where's the participation, where's the opportunity to, as you've been saying all the way through, actually listen to each other. Because so often it's the, you know, well, I've prepared this, so I've got all the answers. Well, if we believe the Holy Spirit's speaking to everybody, then other people are going to be able to read that passage and say, actually, I think the Lord really wants us to notice this. And it's such a, I think it's such an opportunity for church leaders to step on up. The challenge is always, there's expectations from within, and there's pressures from without to do and be certain things. And it's a real challenge to be able to, it requires real character to be able to say, actually, what I'm going to do is be his first and do what he says. And actually, everything else is going to have to follow from that.
Yeah. And, you know, if I'm making it really personal and really honest, I remember, I mean, it's a longer story, but it was the first church plant that we'd done, and it was growing really big and doing really well. And it was in 2013, and I was in the church, and I had an encounter in worship, but part of that was that this person put his hand on my forehead, not in the church, it was and said, "You're dismantled." Okay, and I was like, whoa, okay, so that means that there's this mantle of leadership. That's what I heard God say is taken off. I have no idea what that means, and it's taken me years to begin to keep exploring that, because there's something in me that loved part of that, that found part of my identity, and I don't want to give up. So I could think at different times in the journey since then that I am so radical, but the truth is there are still things that I didn't like giving up. You know, I enjoy speaking, I enjoy the performance of it in that sense. I enjoy hearing something of God and give all of those things, but really, how far am I prepared to go to actually give that up? And I feel like he's really kindly and graciously peeled away little bits. But however radical and however far I think I've gone, there's another thing, and I'm like, oh, really? You know,
that as well.
Yeah. There's still that, I still want to, in some sense, control what it looks like. I still want people to be happy with what I'm delivering. I still, even when I think I don't, I'm hit with a deeper I still. And so it's like, I want to be brave to go where he's taking. And I think sometimes I kid myself that I'm braver than I am, but the truth is, but then on the other side of that, I think something, the restoring of us as humans, as people, in a really linear way, where everybody's voice matters, where every song, every scale, every style of instrument, we don't have to silence one to be bigging up another. It really is what it was supposed to be. I think that's on the other side. So we'll get smaller and crawl through the smaller door, like kind of reverse Alice. And see what's on the other side.
Your answers have been full of wisdom and have been provoking, and I'm sure they will stirred up everyone who's been listening to really think some provocative questions. And I actually think that's a real key, the fact that you come asking a lot of questions as well. I think sometimes we're very passive in our relationship with God and very passive as a church. We just kind of go with the flow. And, again, that kind of questioning, asking, thinking, talking to God, not settling is a real important thing. I mean, we see lots of people in the Bible asking questions and going, how's that going to work out, God? And what's that about? And what do you mean when you say? And all of those questions, even Mary, even she said, I'll go with it. She asked some questions about what it looked like. And I guess that's one of the things we're trying to be part of, the culture that we're trying to create through the school that we run, Celebrate School of Supernatural Ministry. Now, you both come in and you've spoken at school, you've led worship at school, you've seen our students, you've seen us. Why would you encourage someone to do CSSM? Because I know why we'd encourage someone to do it, but it's nice to hear from somebody else. Why would you encourage someone to do this at the School of Supernatural Ministry?
Well, I think one of the things that we love about what you guys, your heart, and what you try and do is that I think it's that making people brave, or giving them space to be brave about their voice, be brave about the power and potential of God in them, be brave about what they could do to change their world, their family, be brave in their creativity. And I think that's why, and I think we see your heart in that, and that's why we want to support you, because I think that's risky, but we've seen so many beautiful results from it. And I think that's why, we love to come and serve you wherever we can and be part of whatever we can with you. And I think that's why we would encourage people to do it. Go and wherever you're at, what you carry will be welcomed. What you don't want to leave with, you'll be helped to get rid of. And in the process, you'll be celebrated and be encouraged to be braver about who you are, the voice you've been given, and what God's given you to do in the world, I think.
And allowed to ask questions.
Yeah, absolutely. We encourage it. In fact, we both really love it when students come with questions and
it makes me nervous when they're quiet.
Yeah.
I'm like, what's going on? This isn't working. Talk to me, speak back to me, ask things, try and refine things. It's
It's one of the things that actually probably has been a little bit hard through the pandemic is sometimes being online, sometimes being live, but then the whole thing with masks and all those things, that just people feeling quiet, I think, because of the situation, feeling constrained and therefore not asking as much, and we've missed that, haven't we? We love it. Yeah. Anyway, we've come to the end of our time with you. Thank you so much for being willing to be interviewed today. Thank you for your wisdom, and we love what you do here in the city, and we love who you are and your hunger and your passion. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Amen.
Guys. Lovely to talk to you.
So thank you for joining us this summer session. If you've enjoyed this session, then why not join us for the next one with Faith Bradford, who's written many books and is also a wonderful speaker. And she's going to be joining us on the 25th of August on live stream. If you are interested in this school because of what you've heard during this session or any of our other sessions, then I encourage you to apply now. The website is on the screen, and we run a variety of full and part-time courses both here in Bradford and in Grimsby.
And speaking of schools, on the 11th of September, we've got the great honour of hosting Paul Manwaring. Paul was an elder at Bethel Church in Redding, California, and continues to resource lots of schools around Europe. To book on that, you can go to our website, kingdomministries.org.uk. You'll also see on there lots of other resources, some speaking resources that Liz and I have done, some books that have been written, and it's a great way to stay in touch with the Sozo world and the other things that we do together as a couple. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you hopefully when we're interviewing Faith.